So my last video I talked about a bunch of the projects I'm working on right now. In this video I want to talk about how I try and get as much stuff as possible done. And this I think is a really big issue for university students because it's the first time you don't really have parents telling you what to do so much, maybe living away from home for the first time, you may be in a new city like I am, and you also have an increased workload, job searching, extracurriculars, resume builders, social life, and sleep. So it's a lot to handle, in addition to new adult sort of responsibilities of taking care of yourself, getting food, all of that. My number one tool for keeping track of what I do and what I need to do is Google Calendar. I used to journal stuff to almost an obsessive amount of detail when I was younger, so I love using Google Calendar and using a ton of different calendars to organize all my different events and types of activities and logging what I do almost 100% of the time. Now, what initially prompted me to do this was trying to plan ahead. So what was I going to do tomorrow? What things was I going to try and accomplish? How long would they take? And this seems to be a really highly recommended way of managing your time, but it really does not work for me because I grossly underestimate how long things take. And even when I try really hard and say, okay, I think it'll take half an hour, maybe it'll take actually an hour or an hour and a half, I still seem to be off the majority of the time. So since I'm normally expecting to be able to accomplish more than I end up reasonably being able to do, that type of organization is actually really discouraging to me. However, I still like the time blocking and recording after or as, ideally, I do things because it's sort of like a credit. Like if I worked 2 hours on a project, even if I didn't finish it, there's proof I worked 2 hours on it. And then the other part of Google Calendar is I use it to keep track of what I need to do. So some of this is in calendars themselves. I made a calendar for my class that had all our events and due dates and exams in it, and it was really helpful, not just for me, but for my classmates. And the other tool I use a lot is the task lists. I love checking things off. I love things being done and out of the way. I like those neat little lists of here's everything you need to accomplish and here are the due dates. So I actually, in addition to using probably 20 or 30 different calendars, used to have about 5 task lists. So I had school, work, household, miscellaneous, and creative projects. At the beginning of this block of time, which for me is a 12-month internship / co-op position, I actually started using paper to-do lists because I had a goal to complete 3 things every day. Because when you have a long list, at least for me, it seems sometimes unfeasible to finish that whole list. And especially if you have a lot of projects and a lot of non-urgent tasks, if you see them all at once, it can be really overwhelming. So I made mini lists every day that had 3 things to do on them. And I actually found this pretty successful, but keeping track on paper was kind of a pain after a while, especially if you had to go back and remember what you did, because I had actually a point system, so it kind of mattered to me at the time. So I've gone back to using Google Calendars and using their task lists only. I actually split up some of my task lists. Hard to say that with braces. So I previously had a to-do list that was basically organization and miscellaneous. And I split it into smaller, urgent tasks and longer-term organizational things. And I did this a few weeks ago. I found basically that I accomplished everything on both lists just because I didn't have to look at there being a long, undoable thing. The other thing I did is I switched my task lists from organized from due dates to organized in my order. This meant it was really easy to prioritize things And instead of having to sort them by due date and actually put them in the calendar in order to see which things needed to be done, I could just prioritize the list so that if I had time to work on that list, I could do the top thing. But I wasn't feeling like I was moving the due date back every time I expected to complete something that I couldn't finish. In addition to making that list, I made new lists for each of the projects I'm currently involved with, one of them being this YouTube channel, one of them being my KnowNano channel, which I will link here, one of them being my new blog, Make Art Daily, in which me and some of my friends, as well as the general internet, make art based off of a different prompt every day. And also my Etsy store. So everything I just talked about will be linked below. I'm feeling really good about being able to work on all these projects and having the time to, but when everything is all put together, it doesn't feel like there's enough time. So then I found myself procrastinating a lot more. Whereas when they're all separated out, I felt like I had more time and things weren't as urgent. There's been two other main changes that I think have really helped in the last couple of weeks, and they're pretty closely related. One of them is that I always would get home and want to get stuff done and out of the way right away, but I would feel tired and like I deserved a break, so I would say something to myself like, okay, I'm gonna sit down for 15 minutes. And that was never like quite long enough, and even half an hour wasn't. And so then I would want to stay and sit longer, and so then I wouldn't start until quite late. And sort of the change I've made is saying an hour instead of 15 minutes or half an hour, because then I actually feel rested and not so rushed, and I actually start at the hour instead of saying half an hour and then starting 2.5 hours later. The other part of that is I would often watch TV when I first came home, or YouTube, and now I've been really trying to save YouTube and TV content that I like to watch while I do some of the work for my Etsy shop. Tasks that are mostly like, okay, I have to cut out and fold 50 cards. Anyway, so those have been my main strategies as of late, and I'd love to hear what some of you guys do to stay organized or what makes staying organized hard. So feel free to leave comments or message me in any of the various social media-y things that are linked below. Bye! The task lists